Good evening, and welcome to the Washington Outsider Report here on the Coalition Radio. Today we are having a special edition from Geneva, and with us today is Dr. Wesam Basindowah, with whom we'll discuss the recent developments following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Biden doctrine, and what the Biden foreign policy means for terrorist groups all around the region, from Yemen to Afghanistan. Dr. Wesam, welcome to the Washington Outsider. And I'd like to start with you introducing yourself, your organizations, and your work a little bit. Just tell us about your background and what you're doing.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for having me, and sorry for being late for technical issues. Okay, I'm Dr. Wesam Basindowah. I'm a professor of international relations, expert in political affairs and freedom. I'm also a political, as you know, I'm a political researcher and article writer. Usually after since 2014, I focused more about human rights and freedom and social societies, civilian, especially after Houthi militia coup against the legitimate government in Yemen, you know, Houthi militia that were backed by Iran regime. And really I have focused to exposing its violations against women, against children, against militaries. Also, I'm a partner of other NGOs, 8th March of Yemeni's Union of Women, and I'm the president of the Arab Coalition of Independent Women. Finally, I'm in Geneva now because of during the session of 48th session of Human Rights Council, and me and my colleague and our group organized many events inside and sidelines of the council's meeting.
And just to elaborate a little bit about your organizations, how did you end up creating or joining them, and what kind of work do they do, and what kind of challenges have you faced in your work?
Look, especially our organization work for women that's independent women that's not related to any parties or just work for civilian societies, and we think that this kind of women and this group of women should be also in the power and should be in the decision maker, just get their chance to decision maker so that we can change a lot. All the time women in our country have challenges and fighting everywhere. We are fighting against Houthis, we are fighting against those who doesn't accept women, stronger women and independent women, as you know.
So that seems to be an endemic issue. Have you faced a lot of pushback from trying to organize these events and focusing your work on this issue?
What do you mean? Sorry?
Have you faced a lot of opposition from various people?
Yeah, sure. We discuss sensitive issues, that somebody does want from you that to be neutral between the militias and the government. They will need you to be neutral and doesn't say all of things that happened by militias. Many of the many of the the activists who work in Yemen, they say they are neutral, but they are make a public relation for the militias. They are I said like washing their crimes by equality between the government and the militias. No.
So it's an interesting position. You're mentioning that they use this language of neutrality. They claim to be equally concerned about everyone's alleged human rights violations, but in reality, it's just a technique because one side is unequivocally worse. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, especially for people who do not know anything about Yemen, and who may believe from reading that indeed there are different parties to the conflict and they are all equally culpable? Can you explain a little bit more?
Feeling sorry in Yemen, the Yemenis feeling sorry that most of the media, most of the human rights NGOs, international NGOs, talk about Yemen from the humanitarian issue, and that doesn't explain that the issue in Yemen is politics conflict. It is not it's a civilian wars, and not war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, Arab coalition and Yemen. It was between the militias who coup against the legitimate government. This militia, it doesn't work alone. It's supported by, backed by Iranian regime, and they are terrorists, and they are make crimes against Yemeni. They use the drones, they use the ballistic missiles. They attack the human objects. The picture, the whole picture of what happened in Yemen, it's not clear to anybody. They just talk about Yemen like it's a fear issue, a humanitarian issue. It's no, it's a politics. It's a politics issue. It's a politics conflict. If we can solve the politics, the political issue, so the humanitarian issue is one of the outcomes of the political issue.
So the approach to resolving the political conflict, particularly lately by the Biden administration, has been to push for a political process for negotiations between Houthis and the Arab coalition and the Yemen government. Now, we know that when Biden sent the US envoy Lander King to negotiate with Houthis, that failed. In fact, the Houthis went on Al Jazeera and laughed about it and said that they can't take American diplomats seriously. But these attempts to push this political process preceded Biden. We saw that during the siege of Hadida in 2018, the international community put a stop to the offensive that would have likely finished off the Houthi uprising and returned the situation from progressing the camps. Why do you think there's this obsession with the political process, with a group of people that are rebelling against the legitimate authorities and who are backed by a foreign state and who have engaged in human rights abuses and attacks both on Yemeni civilians and on Saudi Arabia and others? Why is this obsession to try to create a political resolution rather than let the local people just handle it their way?
Let me first say that The first decision that Biden administration, the new U.S. administration, take that cancel the classification of the Houthis from the terrorist as a terrorist militia. It was shocking for Yemenis. It is a dangerous decision. Because this decision is very important, as it will stop the money laundering operation of the Houthis, especially in Europe and the United States, and it will be like stop the laundering Houthi crimes. Because there is like a human rights who I call them. They are laundering the crimes of the Houthis and make a public relation of the Houthis, and they are very proud to support Houthis. The classification of the Houthis as a terrorist group, they will stop all of this supported Houthis, and it makes it that's what will be helped Yemenis more than any other decision. Other things, they are Biden administration that appointing the special envoy for Yemen, and they say that they will work hard to stop the war in Yemen. But what happened after this? Nothing. The Saudi Arabia in the earlier in 2021, they presented an initiative to stop the war in Yemen, including open Sana'a airport, open the Hodeidah port, and the U.S. administration welcome this initiative. All special friend of Yemen countries welcoming, but the Houthis ignored. The Houthis rejected this initiative, and the American envoy recognized that the Houthis fall all of the peace process. But after that, the U.S. administration just care about the negotiation with the Iranian regime for nuclear file, and Iranian get the Yemen like a card for their negotiation of the nuclear. That's why they didn't stop the militia. They just take the Yemen as a card to push their negotiation in the nuclear fight.
We are seeing a couple of things. First, Houthis have a history of rejecting agreements to which they signed, such as the Stockholm Agreement following the end of the Hodeidah offensive. They've continuously rejected peace initiatives in Outrage. Nevertheless, the international community, the UN and the United States have continued to push for the political process with this group. Now we are seeing that while these negotiations are ongoing, Houthis have not stopped their attacks. They're engaged in an offensive on Marib, which is considered a key stronghold of the coalition. And if they take it, most analysts believe that they'll essentially have a free control of Yemen, and they can even take their fight to Saudi Arabia. They've launched numerous attacks on Saudi territory, and of course they continued to terrorize Yemenis in different places. So this entire time, they have not engaged in talks in good faith. Americans have approached them, Saudis have approached them, others have tried to talk to them, but they've been playing this game, rejecting demands, and essentially the US and others have been forcing concessions on. They've been giving them free gifts with nothing in return, and yet pretending like this is a talks. Talks usually require good faith. They require cessation of hostilities. they require some sort of reasonable agreement to compromise, or at least to discuss the issues that we don't see this happening. This is not really a political process.
Yeah.
What is this? What do you think is the goal of the administration in giving Yemen to an Iran proxy, knowing that Iran is becoming more and more established in Yemen? How do you think this will serve the Middle East if Iran becomes completely directly embedded in Yemen?
You know what, Irina, that I agree with you that when the national armies is progress to liberate the Hodeidah, so that all the human rights international NGOs and the special envoy of the special envoy of Yemen, they talks about the human crisis in Hodeidah, and they try to stop progress of the national armies to liberate the Hodeidah. And after that, they go to Stockholm and make the Stockholm Agreement, and it's not gone. It's like just keep the Houthis control Hodeidah, and now these days the Houthi, before now 6 months, the Houthi or more, the Houthi attacks Marib, and day and night bombing in Marib, civilian object, hospitals, mosques, schools, everywhere, and nobody tried to stop Houthis attack Marib. And nowadays the Houthis also progress in the south back, he doesn't stop also only in control Sana'a and this is the cities north of Yemen. Now also come back to the south of Yemen. Nobody stopped them, and this politics which equal between the government and the militias, between the countries like Arab Coalition who come to define about government legitimate, and between the militias. The shock that what happened in Afghanistan, they already give the Afghanistan for Taliban, and now in Iran the same. Now the president of Iran is one of the wanted. He's and now he is in UN and give us examples for the freedom and for and how he cares about Yemenis, about Yemeni. Yeah, he is a killer. He's a killer. That's why if they continue with this politics in Yemen, the same what's happening in Afghanistan, it will be very dangerous in this, not only for Yemenis, not only for regions, it's dangerous for the world.
You just mentioned Afghanistan. You brought up a similar issue with Afghanistan, and I wanted to underscore a couple of specific things that make these situations very, very similar. First of all, both conflicts have been going on for a fair amount of time. Second, we have seen gross human rights abuses. Right now, after the Taliban takeover, the media is not really speaking about it, but I myself have seen images of the Tajik minority in the Panjshir Valley being massacred by an assortment of groups and affiliates, Taliban themselves, Chechens, various foreigners that have come in, foreign mercenaries who have come in and are assisting in shutting down the possibility of resistance in that particular area. And of course, in Yemen, we are seeing Houthi persecution of everybody who is not Houthi because of their fanatical ideology, and of course trying to shut down anybody they even suspect of being affiliated or sympathetic to the coalition and opposed to their own goals. So we are seeing that one issue, but the other issue is the strange situation with the territorial takeover, where the Pentagon, essentially the US Pentagon, has turned a blind eye on the fact that Taliban was increasingly gaining strength on the ground and by various means taking over territory, sometimes through direct fighting, sometimes through bribery, sometimes through ideological outreach. In various ways, they have managed to succeed. So when people talk today about how they were shocked that the Taliban got to power so quickly after the US decided to withdraw, I don't find that credible, because in reality they've been taking over, they've been making a lot of progress very quickly, and we're seeing the same situation with the Houthis. I think if Marib were to fall tomorrow, everybody would suddenly be shocked. How come they only suddenly, how come this group of rebels suddenly took over? In reality, of course, for those of us watching the situations, they did not. So it sounds to me almost as if these groups have been allowed to make this progress, allowed to take over, almost as if the country was given over to them at every stage. They could have been stopped. Taliban could have been stopped or disrupted. Their outreach, their financial operations, their military operations could have been disrupted, because at the end of the day, they've become more sophisticated, but they're not a state actor or a sophisticated group. And same as with Houthis, they've been trained by Iran, by Hezbollah, but they did not start out being very sophisticated, but they start out increasing their capacity for weapons over time. They've increased their Iran increased and improved their weapons over time. They've increased their intelligence capabilities at the time, but they were not always what they are now. So how did it get to the point, in your opinion, that this progressive ascendancy of these terrorist organizations has been allowed to continue and gain power and improve their capabilities until they become powerful forces that are now challenging US trained militaries?
You know, that way, if it's happened in Afghanistan, that the government in Afghanistan is supported by United States for 20 years, their armies get supported, and after that they let Taliban. Taliban is the same in what happened in Yemen. In Yemen, start the national dialogue, and it's was under the cover of UN and all big countries and US. But when the Houthi coup against the legitimate government by the force of arm, until now they deal with the Houthis as de facto power in Yemen, and they deal with them as a de facto. That's what happened in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan,
Froze up.
What? No?
Okay, no, I can hear you. You froze up for a second, but now it's fine.
Okay, in Afghanistan, Taliban is a militia. Taliban is a terrorist militia, and it coup against the legitimate government by the force. And now all the big countries like United States and Europe and Germany, British, also they discuss how they will they will deal with Afghanistan and make a normal relation between them. And so we're not surprised if it happened next month or next year with the Taliban, and hope it not happened with Yemen. But this is the US politics for the new administration is very dangerous, and we cannot expect what they are going to do with by this way. But I agree with you, and we discuss also this night today after what happened in Yemen, in South Yemen, that Houthis are also progress there. What are they going to do? They want Houthis to control all of Yemen, like what happened in Afghanistan, or what? And the same, as you say, who supported Taliban is the same country who are celebrated when Taliban control Afghanistan. They are the same in Yemen, that we are Muslims brothers and Iranian, and that's who supported by Qatar. Same.
So there's some more interesting parallels in the whole situation that almost makes me wonder if the whole situation has not been in the works for far longer than the events we are now currently observing, because there are just so many similarities between them. You mentioned earlier that the war in Yemen is not a humanitarian war. Interestingly, when the Biden administration removed Houthis from the FTO listing, from the foreign terrorist designation, they described all the atrocities that the Houthis described, and all of it fit with the definition of a terrorist organization. And they acknowledged all these things that Houthis are doing. They acknowledged the terrorism, and it almost sounded like they were placing the Houthis on the terrorist designation list. And the only reason they said that they were being removed was for out of humanitarian concern. So it was the Biden administration that kind of bought into this narrative and returned to giving the Houthis aid that they can divert towards their own corrupt ends, towards the war, towards their fighters, and so forth, and towards, of course, exercising control over the population by prioritizing who gets the aid and who doesn't. Now, with the Taliban, we are seeing the same thing. Taliban has asked the international community for official recognition. And Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, had said that the administration is considering potentially giving humanitarian aid to Taliban, even though they froze the government assets for now. So we are seeing, again, humanitarian aid being used sort of as a lifeline to regimes that would otherwise likely collapse. And I want to understand what is the process here. Why use humanitarian aid to empower the very people who create the need for this humanitarian aid, as opposed to figuring out a solution how to get that aid to the people and bypassing terrorist organizations that are known, have a history of withholding it, have a history of treating different people unequally, persecuting minorities within their own populations, and so forth. What is the thinking in the administrations that are supposedly so concerned with human rights?
As you know, the Houthis use the human crisis in Yemen to extortion,
yes.
Extortion political, and they get the aids and sold it in black market in Sana'a. It's not going to the people who really need the aids. Otherwise, lifting the Houthis from the succession of the terrorist group, they doesn't help in humanitarian crisis now, like 9 months. And what happened in the humanitarian crisis? Nothing. It's increased. And the Houthis militia operations escalated after after lifting some sanction on Iran. The Houthis military operation is increased. Nobody saw that. Every day, every night, they attack by drones, by plastic muscles. All of this after just lifting some of the sanction against Iran, so that if they are lifting all of the sanctions of Iran, it will be very dangerous. It will be like they give a big gift for Iran and militia. So
another point, the administration, as I said, claims to care about human rights, democracy, things like that. We are seeing that they are essentially supporting groups that are completely undemocratic, who have a rigid structure that's tribal, religiously fanatical, discriminatory towards others, and highly sectarian, and authoritarian in their enforcement. And we have seen that both the Houthis and the Taliban engaged in abuses recently. Most recently in Yemen, we just discussed the killing of 9 people accused of murdering, of assassinating a Houthi political leader. One of them was just 13 years old when he was arrested and was tortured until he was paralyzed for 3 years before being publicly executed, ISIS style, I might add, and in public with a video that Houthis used to promote their own position, very much like ISIS, even though they're supposedly Zaidi and come from different ideology. The Taliban, has been shooting people, hunting down US allies, hunting down critics, political critics, musicians, comedians, folk singers, and so forth, executing them. These massacres are not being reported, not being discussed. The administration issues pointless statements, but takes no action to sanction anybody or to eliminate any of the people engaged in actively violent activities. So where is the commitment to human rights here when human rights abusers are being openly empowered? This is not a question of investigating an incident that can be an accident or can be, on purpose. This is clear intent of abusive activity, clear planned massacres, clear planned torture, and so forth. All of that requires intent, and all of it is very clearly speaks for itself because they advertise it. They use it as a power play to advertise themselves. How can the US government, claiming to support human rights and democracy, be supportive of these groups? Not just supportive, but empowering them actively, even as they claim to be so concerned about human rights?
You know that what they punish the countries about human rights issues, but they didn't ask militias when they make crimes, and we didn't respect the human rights, like what happened in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, nobody asked now what is the journalist, what happened with the woman in Afghanistan, all the journalists, the liberal, the freedom in Afghanistan. Nobody asked about this. Same what happened, same as Houthis in Yemen. But if there is any issue happen in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Morocco, so that they talk about the human rights and they punish the countries. Also here in Human Rights Council, when we talk to the special report envoy about the militia, they told we didn't deal with militia. If there is any crimes happen from the government, so we can deal with them, but with militia we cannot do anything. So that they deal with the militias as a factors, but they didn't accountable them about their crimes. That's strange, really.
So another contradiction that I see, and that's also kind of links Yemen and Afghanistan in another strange way, again, almost as if the whole situation was planned to empower certain actors. Al-Qaeda and ISIS have been resurging in both countries. Al-Qaeda had been beaten back, especially with the help of the Emirati forces for a time. And now we have seen over the past few months, especially after Biden took office, them coming back and attacking bases and just making their presence known. In Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda leaders are returning from Iran, where they took a safe refuge,
Yeah.
something that Secretary Pompeo had acknowledged at the very end of the administration, but the Biden administration has not really reached. Now, on 9/11, on the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the United States, Biden made an interesting comment. He said, does the world expect us to go invade every country that has Al-Qaeda presence? At the same time, however, he underscored, not in the same statement, but in recent comments, he underscored the importance of fighting ISIS. And he said the Taliban and ISIS are enemies. And the Taliban could, repeating again Secretary Pompeo's earlier kind of comment that Taliban could be a security partner for the US in fighting ISIS. ISIS has become an excuse to avoid dealing with larger issues, but here's the irony. Back in the day, under the Obama administration, the US embraced Iranian militias because they were supposedly fighting ISIS. Now we are seeing the Taliban had freed Al-Qaeda and ISIS prisoners when the US abandoned the Bagram base. 5,000 prisoners, which included ISIS and Al-Qaeda, among the Taliban prisoners, were liberated by their alleged enemies. Now we are seeing that Biden says we are not going to be fighting Al-Qaeda in Yemen. That's the implication of his comments. By the way, the original reason for the US presence in Yemen had nothing to do with Houthis and had everything to do with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The original authorization for the US military presence in Yemen had been Al-Qaeda. So now US is saying that Al-Qaeda, which had attacked US, is not important enough for US to attack them, that ISIS is a threat, but the Taliban is somehow a counter to it, even though we see clear connections between Taliban and Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We are seeing excuses made for the Haqqani Haqqani network, which are formal security partners for the Taliban, and they're using Taliban intelligence to attack ISIS-K, the local ISIS branch, with the result that we cannot identify a single ISIS leader that had been killed, but we did kill a number of civilians. And by the way, no apologies had been really issued to the country, to the Arab coalition, for US attacking them repeatedly and nagging them about casualties of a flawed intelligence. US just took intelligence from Taliban, supposedly to kill ISIS. Supposedly ISIS is Taliban's enemies and we working together to fight them, and we kill civilians and there's no ISIS. What is going on here? What is the US position on counterterrorism that we are seeing them actually forget now Taliban and Houthis for a second, because let's say Houthis were never directly an enemy of the United States, even though their slogans claim death to America, but let's leave that aside. Let's say Houthis never directly attacked US on US soil. Let's say Taliban did not attack US on US soil, but Al-Qaeda did. So why is the US taking the position that Al-Qaeda is not important? And even if ISIS is important, somehow these other terrorist organizations that also hate Americans can be beneficial in fighting them. Something is strange is going on. These events empower Al-Qaeda, they empower ISIS. All these terrorist groups are clearly linked together. Houthis expressed support for the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Who is US actually fighting? Which terrorist group is terrorist enough for the Biden administration to be taken seriously? And can any of them be really separated from one another at this point in time? Al-Qaeda came back from Iran US
Yeah.
continues empowering Iran, even though it harbored the very group that attacked the United States and killed nearly 3,000 Americans in one day. So I'm trying to just understand what is the administration's actual position on terrorist groups. Who is terrorist enough? Why is Iran so desirable when they literally harbor terrorists? I mean, what is the game here? What is the vision that is being pursued? Maybe you can tell me, because I'm not understanding this.
No. I'm agree with you about this administration that we cannot know. But about the difference between Al Qaeda and Daesh, I'm one of the people who cannot see the difference between Al Qaeda or ISIS. I see that ISIS is the new version of Al Qaeda. That's fine. About the supported of between the relation between Al Qaeda and Iran. Nobody now doesn't know that Al Qaeda was based in Iran and supported by Iran for a long time. But when the world understand this relation, it's so far. It's not from the beginning. Now, after we cannot wait also 20 years to understand that ISIS also supported by Iran, and all this is terrorist group supported by Iran. I didn't see the difference between Al Qaeda, ISIS, Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. All of this is a terrorist group. All this militias can increase and can be better when with war. They cannot live with peace. Their belief is the same, Shias or Sunnis, and United States and Europe, they will not section this militias as a terrorist group until they attack them in the US. Al Qaeda did, but the ISIS not do it until now, or Houthis doesn't do it until now. But it's not mean they are waiting to bring them up to attack US inside. So that's very strange in the new administration in the US.
And another issue again, to kind of focus a little bit more on these terror groups, and before moving on to kind of, to another aspect of the same scenario. We are seeing that Afghanistan is likely to become once again a recruiting ground for terrorism, for just not only for other Taliban supporters, but for Al Qaeda, ISIS, and anybody operating in that sphere, splinter groups, whatever you say. We're also seeing that with the return of these groups to Yemen, it's not that they completely left, but resurgence of them. They're likely to try to recruit more followers. Now, of course, terrorist groups operate in cells. They focus on their own piece of territory and act independently. But there is a good chance that these groups, now that they have, free reign in Yemen, free reign in Afghanistan, that they will also make contacts with one another. Al Qaeda in Yemen will be supportive of Al Qaeda groups in Afghanistan. ISIS in Yemen will certainly not be an enemy of ISIS in Afghanistan, and so forth. Do you see this territorial gain by these terrorist organizations as kind of linking geographically and creating more of a kind of terrorist groups in strategic areas? Yemen is strategically important for international trade, not only, and also a doorstep to Saudi Arabia. Afghanistan is likewise a very strategically important country between India, Pakistan, and all these other, China and all these other places, Central Asia. How do and it's almost like somebody thought it was a great idea to allow terrorists to proliferate in some of the most strategic countries from an international perspective, and to also now allow them to gain kind of proximity from these strategic areas to one another. They're gaining ground. They can build bridges from different parts of the world, from the Middle East to Southeast Asia. How do you see this working out exactly?
I don't know, but just if you see what when Taliban controlled Afghanistan, the celebrate it comes from all of it, from Houthis, from Hezbollah, from ISIS, from Daesh, from Al-Qaeda. Houthis that doesn't say that it's Muslim Sunnis group and it's against us. They feel that it's empowerment for all militias to get their target after if they were fighting for a long time, but after this they will get their target by the same ways, so that what happened in Afghanistan give them more power and for Houthis or other militias in everywhere to continue their ways, to continue their tools, to control the countries, and at the end they will get their target, and they will get legitimate from all the world.
You know, I kind of want to circle back to Yemen again and take a look at what's going on. You know, I start to sound like Jen Psaki with circling back, but I want to take a look at Al-Qaeda is emerged as a Muslim Brotherhood entity. Everyone knows that it has its roots in Muslim Brotherhood ideology, that Muslim Brotherhood has given its financial support. Members have been recruited from the Muslim Brotherhood. It has taken an openly violent path, whereas Muslim Brotherhood is seen as a funder of terrorists and maybe as a planner, but also more as a political entity. But in reality, it's part of the same mechanism. Now, in Yemen, we are seeing the increasing strength, Al-Islah, the Muslim Brotherhood branch in Yemen, gaining political power. Do you expect that as a result of the growth and strengthening of this political branch, do you think that the Al-Qaeda and other affiliate Muslim Brotherhood, violent Muslim Brotherhood affiliates on the ground will also gain strength? Do you think there is a connection between them?
You know that Al-Islah in Yemen, they say they are not Muslim brothers and they're different, and there is several classify in several wings in the Islah in Yemen. One's more radical, that's related to Turkey, to Istanbul and Turkey, and others are a partner of the government, and they say they are not Muslim brother, and they are under the legitimate of government.
Mm-hmm. And is there really a difference between them, or how is it possible that the same organization can have such supposed difference in membership?
Really, to be honest with you, until now, we can see the difference between them. This is the soft power of Islam. They are using other. They still, they are fighting by their ways, but not using the using the military against Yemeni. They didn't use any kind of, but they are as Muslim brother everywhere. They try to control everything, to just work with their people, but still they are. I see the difference. To be honest, I see the difference between this is who Islah. Now there is Islah in Cairo, there is Islah in Saudi Arabia, but they are different than that's what's supported by Qatar and Turkey, to be honest. Yeah.
Mhm. And do you think here's an important question, because there's been Saudi Arabia has been subjected to a lot of criticism, as well as the Yemen government for working with al-Islah. Some Saudis are saying, well, it's impossible to cut them out completely. They're a major segment of the population, and they're not violent, so we can try to work with them.
They didn't use the violence. Yeah, that's a word. They didn't use the violence, and really they are partner with us, with all Yemenis against the Houthis. That's normal. Not all of the Islah support. That's must. Now the medias of Islah part of accept Houthis, but this is a very rare from them. But Islah until now they are partner of all Yemenis against Houthis. That's and they are faced the same problem, and the Houthis made the same crimes against Islah, and they are bombing their houses. They are Yemenis, and they are partner against Houthis with us, really, or with all Yemenis.
Well, in the last few years, questions emerged about this.
The last questions.
Yeah. That's the thing. I just want to follow up on what you said about Islah and Houthis, because on the one hand, yes, they've been working with the coalition, in the coalition, as part of the Yemeni government. On the other hand, there's been stories about intelligence leaks to Houthis through al-Islah members of the coalition. Members of the coalition who were Islah affiliates were replaced as a result of this reporting. So the question is, how can you tell who in al-Islah is really opposed to the to the Houthis, and who is actually just using this as a cover and are really more close to Houthis than they would ever admit in public? How can you tell who is actually really with the government and who isn't?
It's a hard job. It's a hard job, and it's intelligent job. I think it's very difficult to understand what happened. Yeah. This is a very difficult. This is the main question. Maybe if you can't find this, the war was finished from long time.
Because there is no clear distinction. They're saying that they're against the Houthis, that Houthis commit crimes, and yet some of them are clearly cooperating with Houthis, even though Houthis claim to hate them. I don't understand how that's possible, but it's clear that at the very least you have a very gray area that's very difficult to consider a solid ally, which is resulting in a lot of losses and contingencies and problems for the coalition, and there's no real way of isolating them completely either. So this kind of situation is we're kind of stuck. So leaving that aside, because that seems to be an unresolvable dilemma at the moment, we are seeing from all of this that the Biden doctrine, from Afghanistan to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and now Biden is about to normalize with Assad to some extent as well. And of course, now Yemen has been to actually focus single-handedly on Iran, on empowering Iran, and essentially ignore whatever is not convenient. That seems to be the essence of the US foreign policy. That's the famous Biden doctrine that seems to govern, and it has not reassured anybody. It has not helped with the negotiations in Vienna. I have not seen any progress. I haven't seen US gain anything out of any of this, and yet this policy continues. US keeps having diplomatic losses, political losses, military, avoidable military losses, and yet the administration keeps pushing on, not gaining anything from Iran or anybody else. I'm trying to figure out whether they're really so blind, whether they're just traitors, or whether they're just corrupt and getting some financial cut, and as soon as they get what they need, they'll get out and leave somebody else to clean up the mess. I don't understand what's really going on, but I see that the US has lost its standing in the world due to these policies. And there's no one really to fill the vacuum, because China and Russia, first of all, they have different agendas, and second of all, they're not reliable and have, and they're also close to Iran as well. So we are not really seeing, we are seeing increasingly Arab states trying to maneuver with China, Russia, and even Iran, but it's also not helping them, because none of that has stopped terrorism, none of that has stopped security issues. So what is the future? That's the final note. What do you see as the future in the next few years until we get a different administration, hopefully, in office?
Well, we wait for this 3.5 years to finish very fast and get a new administration in US, because we cannot continue with this administration for next 8 years. It will be horrible. And I think, I guess from your speech that you are supported America become great again, yeah?
Well, I don't think America stopped being great. I think we have leaders who are not great and not even good.
Because he's now not involved in any issue that, like, what
our
happened
institutions are great. Our constitution is great. What's not great is the people in power for making reckless decisions.
Yes,
but yeah, I don't know what the plan is for anybody. I just don't really see anyone propose any sort of strategy to kind of go around Biden's mess, because and to kind of create separate alliances that could be strong against Houthis, against Iran, and just ignore these pressures and international institutions. I mean, at the end of the day, what can they do? Okay, Biden can yell and make statements and condemn Saudi Arabia and whoever, but what can they really do at the end of the day if they can't even handle Taliban?
What?
What can the US or the international community really do that prevents the Arab coalition and local countries of basically taking their self-defense in their own hands, not waiting for Biden, not waiting for some future US administration, not waiting for the international community's green light, and just doing what they need to do to clean up Houthis, Iran, or whoever needs to be cleaned up? Why?
I think that all countries, not Arab coalition or Yemeni, all countries should depend on their people and their power and their targets, and not waiting for, because this is the change of the strategies of administration in US. What happened in last years, if the strategies change with the president, it's not a democracy. It's just personal decision, so that they cannot make a long strategy for the countries who has a good relations. Now you see what happened between the United States and France, for example. It's now have a bad relation between them, and otherwise the good relation become with China. And you cannot imagine what happened. You cannot know. And others, they are trying maybe thinking about make relation with Taliban. This is, nobody can imagine what happened.
I mean, Taliban has already visited the White House, but I can imagine them at the UN Security Council, or once they're normalized enough, traveling all over the world and just, shaking hands with regular
Like-
politicians.
Yeah, like Iranian regime, who can believe that Iranian regimes accepted, and it's like 50 years it's controlled the power in Iran, and it become facto, and all of countries make a normalization with this terrorist regime.
Well, we are in for a world right, that's for sure. Thank you so
I think
much.
the Taliban will get the model. They will get the Iranian regime as a model for.
Absolutely. I mean, they're looking, at the end of the day, they need financial support because they have their funding is frozen. They still need to govern somehow badly, but they still need to maintain some sort of a political presence. So they will go to whoever is willing to give them money, whether it's China, whether it's Iran, some combination of the two. They're not going to stay completely independent for long. These are not people to govern anything on their own. They're not educated. They have no skills, no money, no institutions.
They cannot administrate the country. It's not only the army is not everything. The military is not everything. They're not educated. They hadn't experience to control the countries. So what happened? They need vaccine. They need vaccinated. They need health. They need the food. They need they not study. They need study. They will change the school like. Still they decided that girls not go to school. Nobody can imagine that happen in 2021.
It's terrible. Cookies, by the way, are not much different. They are trying to erase the women from public square. They themselves, a lot of them, are not educated at all. They, to the extent they control political offices, they've turned everything into a mess with no services, no hospitals, nothing. So I don't really see much of a difference, honestly. They can
no difference.
or their budget, whatever they want, but it's the same. People not fit to govern, and they're barely even, human beings, and they are going to be patronized by somebody else, Iran most likely, because Iran stands to benefit the most from having direct control. China benefits from cutting deals, from exploiting natural resources, from having a geographical presence, from building bases, but Iran benefits from having a presence. And that's what I think we are going to see. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us at this late hour Geneva time, and after a very long day and week and month. Thank you so much for your insight. That was Dr. Wesam Basindowah and from Yemen Coalition of Independent Women, and we've been discussing the disastrous Biden doctrine policy that has turned countering terrorism into empowering terrorism.
Thank you very much, Irina, to having me, and thank you for your support all the time, and thank you for it was a very interesting dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a good night, everyone. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.